Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory Podcast. On this episode, we have Hans from North Carolina, and he had a terrifying Bigfoot encounter in the Goshen Swamps. North Carolina has had a lot of Bigfoot reports in the past, and it just amazes me how an East Coast state can have so many Bigfoot sightings, and it truly is amazing. Hans was deer hunting in the swamps when he encountered a creature that he will never forget. The Bigfoot creature is living in the swamps and it moves through there freely, seeking its next meal. Have you had a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to share with me here on the channel? If so, please contact me sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. I wanted to take the time to personally thank everyone for listening to these Bigfoot encounters, and here at Sasquatch Theory, we do not charge a membership fee to hear the truth. I have gotten complaints in the past from people who have shared their Bigfoot encounters and want this information to get out to the world, but people charge a membership fee, and I just wanted you guys to know that these Bigfoot encounters are for everyone, and I want to get the truth out there. I might start up a membership one day of me going out in the woods searching for these creatures, but I will never charge you guys to listen to these Bigfoot encounters that need to be heard, and they are shared to me by people who feel like it's important to get this information out there. But anyways, with all that being said, let's dive straight into Hans' Bigfoot encounter from the state of North Carolina. All right, Hans, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Hope you are.
Yeah, I'm doing excellent. It's a nice spring day here in Missouri and where you're at, North Carolina. Hans, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the very beginning, please.
Alrighty. Well, my name is Hans. I'm a registered nurse here in North Carolina. Spent 15 years as a firefighter paramedic in Kinston, North Carolina. Got a little bit burnt out, PTSD, just too many bad calls, and got into nursing. I've been in the OR for about 18 or 19 years now in the operating room. And now I'm actually doing site nursing, so I'm helping some of our veterans and some of the people that have diseases and things that you can't really put on paper and you can't really see a whole lot. So I'm helping people out with I have to be very observant and everything because these guys have got psych issues going on, and so and I've always been an observer all my life, of course, with the fire department and being a paramedic and making critical decisions and stuff. So so that's about my extent. Currently right now I'm working at a behavioral health acute hospital. But that's about it from as far as my background goes.
Okay, Hans, I appreciate you for sharing that with me, and I'm sure that's a very difficult job to do. Could you tell me about your first Bigfoot experience or encounter from the very beginning and kind of put me in your shoes? What were you doing that day and how did all of this unfold?
Okay. Well, in December 15th of 1985, my father very unexpectedly and tragically passed away at 40 years old. He had a massive heart attack. At the time, I was in Washington, D.C. on a ROTC field trip with my high school, so I had to come back and deal with my father's death. So my uncle at the time decided to take me hunting, and I had a very dear friend of mine. He's probably no longer with us. He was a very old man that I had met at church, and he had some land down around Duplin County, around Kenansville, North Carolina, and a large part of that area down there is unpopulated. Bladen County, places like that, Onslow County, a lot of swampland, a lot of salt marshes down there, just hundreds of miles of nothing but woods, very easy, very thick to get lost in. So we were hunting on a stretch of property that was a farm of his. It was a sweet potato field, and it butted up to the Goshen Swamp. Goshen Swamp is fed by Cape Fear River, which in turn is fed by the Haw River up in the mountains. So it's just a tributary all the way down. And as it gets here, the Cape Fear River splits off to the northeast Cape Fear River and the regular Cape Fear River. So it was down around the Goshen Swamp, and the field. It was a cold December morning, or it might have been January. I think it was January. It was right before the hunting season was going to go out that year. My uncle wanted to take me out, clear my mind. It was probably about 35, 40 degrees that morning. We got to the place. He said, I'm going to walk around. There's a little finger of land coming out, and he was going to walk around it and get in a deer stand on the other side. And he wanted me to stay in the tree, next to the vehicle. So I got up in the tree stand, and I noticed some deer coming out of that corner of the field. It started getting later in the evening. I said, well, I need to kind of move down there because this is kind of a long shot for me. And that's where they're coming out. And I have a feeling there's a big old, buck that's going to come out eventually down there in that corner. So as I walked down to the corner, um, this farmer had it to where he had a little peninsula that jutted out about, maybe 40 feet out into the swamp. And it was about 9 feet wide, and either side of it was lined with trees all the way down to the end. And he had a ramp at the end. Now, what this is for is you can back a very large tractor down to the edge of the water, put in irrigation pipe, and you can pump it to the field and use the water out of the swamp rather than wasting, precious tap water to irrigate your crops. Well, at the time, it was, all this, the farming had been done, the tractor was gone, the irrigation pipe was gone. So I was basically sitting with my back to the field and facing the peninsula, which was about 9 feet wide and about 40 foot long. And on all three sides, of course, is water. And it's a brackish, really dark, stained water. But on top of it, it had duckweed. Duckweed is a very fine uh, growth on the top of the water. It's a plant. But if you ever get into duckweed and get it in your hair or whatever, it's almost impossible to get it out. It's just ridiculous. So I got there and I could hear something coming through the water. And I was like, okay, well, this is my moment. I had been waiting for all day long. It was getting close to dark. The sun was headed down, and I was waiting for this deer to come out on this peninsula. And I was in complete camouflage. I had head to toe camouflage. I was just completely blended in with the environment. And next thing you know, all of a sudden, I see what I think is a leg step out of the water. And I'm like, man, that's going to be somebody. He's going to make me mad because here I am trying to shoot a deer, and this hunter is in the water messing my stuff up. Well, as I continued to watch, it was almost like a fluid motion. And what come up out of the swamp was the only thing I could think of was a huge guy with a ghillie suit on because he was dripping with water. But it didn't take me but just a couple of seconds to realize, okay, he's way too big to be a human being, and those proportions are not correct for a man. I mean, I'm a nurse, and so I saw the huge head, the huge shoulders, and I was like, this is no human. And it stepped out into the path almost like it slid into the path, almost like it was gliding. And it stood there for a second. It had its left side turned to me, so he walked from the right to the left across. The first step when he come out of the water was in the middle of that 9 foot path. So it was a 4.5, 5 foot stride. I knew for a fact because we took measurements after he left. But he come up out of the water, and I was like, that's got to be a Bigfoot. Of course, I saw all the Bigfoot movies, back in the 70s, Legend of Boggy Creek, Legend of Black Lake or Creature of Black Lake. So I had knew, I had seen him, and it scared the tar out of me when I was young, especially the all the Bigfoot and everything. I just was out of my mind at the time, but at 15 years old, I'm a junior in high school, getting ready to be a senior, and uh, to see something like this and not know what it is was very, very scary. Um, its arms were at least touching, or if not a little bit below his knee. and the legs were massive. The legs were absolutely massive. He had huge, bulging thighs that went down to huge calves. And then his feet, there was no hair on the side of his feet or the bottom of his feet that I could tell, but the top had a little bit of hair on top of his feet. I looked up and his head was basically a bowling ball sitting on his shoulders. He had no neck whatsoever. His hair was matted. I didn't get a really good smell because the wind was coming from my back to him, so I knew he didn't smell me. And all I could smell was the water that had been stirred up. The damp, musty water had been stirred up, the mud and silt. That's the only thing I could really smell about him. But I froze. My whole body went white hot. I felt nauseated, dizzy. I was like, I don't know what this is, and I don't think this gun is going to handle it if it comes after me. And I just started staring at it. It was probably 25, 30 seconds. We were there together, but in just one smooth move from his waist to his head, he turned. So he didn't turn his head, he turned his whole entire body, like he twisted at the waist and looked right at me. When he looked at me, I could see his lips. They looked like really worn leather. I could see his teeth. They were square. They weren't fangs. They weren't sharp. They were just like ours, but they were huge. And he won't grimacing or growling. It won't even smiling. He just had his mouth open. I could see his teeth. Couldn't really see a tongue or anything. I looked up. His nose was really broad and a little bit flattened. So it wasn't like a snout or a muzzle or anything. It was flat. Eyes sunk really deep in the back of his head, probably 2 inches in the back of his head. I mean, they were sunk in. His brow was furrowed at the top from where the top of his brow ridge was to the top of his head was almost just like a pure slope straight up. His head come down in a cone shape in the back, and at the back there was nothing but long hair. His head, he had hair from his neck down, long hair, and then his head up was short. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I could tell about how big he was because right around the nipple line of this thing was the duckweed. So I knew he was wading in that duckweed, and ever how deep that water was, that's going to tell me about how big he is. So the duckweed was right around the nipple line. I didn't see genitals because he had just a big, massive furrow of hair where his genitals would have been. Wasn't a female because I didn't see breast. However, this thing was at least 4 foot wide at the shoulders. And it just looked like the typical linebacker with shoulder pads on and a helmet put on top of them. It was just a massive, massive thing. Didn't make any sound a whole lot other than walking through the water. Looked at me. I looked at him. I went white hot. I could not move. I could not say anything. I could not speak. I didn't have cameras. We didn't have no cell phones back then. But I took my gun off safety. I don't know how I did it, but I did. And it made a click. And I knew there was intelligence there when I made that click on that gun. This thing kind of cocked sideways, almost cocked his head kind of sideways, like, what was that? And should I be worried about it? And I just froze. I mean, I didn't do anything else. He straightened his head back up. He turned back. He took one more step off of the peninsula, which is another 4.5, 5 foot stride. He stepped right back in the water, just almost like he glid into the water. And all I could see was his shoulders up to his head walking off in the water. Well, I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know if I blacked out. I don't know what happened. But when I kind of come back around to my senses, my uncle was standing over the top of me going, "Are you okay? Did you pass out? What is wrong?" I'm like, "Did you see it?" He's like, "No, I heard you." I said, "What do you mean you heard me?" He said, "You yelled." I said, "I yelled?" He said, "Yeah, you yelled and I came." I'm like, "I don't remember that." He said, "Well, what's wrong?" I said, "I don't know." I said, I thought it was a guy hunting." I said, "But it was too big to be a guy." He said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well," he said, "Well, let's go down there and check it." I said, "No, I'm not going down there." He said, "Let's go check it out. We got to make sure what it is." I said, "If it's another guy, we can't hunt down here no more with people walking through the swamp. We're gonna kill somebody." I said, "All right." We walked down there to the right of the peninsula, and you could see, and it was a clear path of muddy water where he come out of the water. And he said, "That's where he come out?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Okay." He said, "Well, let's see. Where did he go back in?" And we looked at the other side, and sure enough, it was the other side. It trailed off. And he said, "What exactly did you see?" And I basically told him, I said, "I think it was a Bigfoot." And as soon as I said that, he said, "Okay." So he grabbed a stick and he put it down in the water where this thing come out. And all the way down in the mud and the water, all the way up to where the duckweed was, we pulled the stick out. It was 6.5 feet to where the duckweed was on this stick that we put down in the water. Just as soon as that happened, he told me, he says, "Turn around, run to the truck, and don't look back." And my uncle's been in the woods all his life. He's been all over the place with my other uncle. And when he told me that, I turned around, and that's exactly what I did. I sprinted back to the truck. He was right behind me. Of course, I was a little bit faster, but when I got back to the truck, he's like, "Let's go ahead and get out of here." And I said, "What is wrong?" He said, "I'll take you down the road. Let's go." So as we got down the road, we finally stopped to get something to drink because we were both parched. And he said, "I won't say anything." And he said, "But something was walking around my deer stand just out of sight." He said, "I kept hearing something grunt at me, and I thought it was a deer grunting." He said, "But it was too deep to be a deer." And he said, "But it kept walking around. It walked around my deer stand like 2 or 3 times, and I could never see it, but I could hear it walking, and it was on 2 feet." He said, "So it must have been what you saw." And he said, "That's the only thing I can think of." He said, "But I won't stand around for it to come back and for us to find out." So that was my encounter when I personally laid eyes on Bigfoot. So I'm a knower. I'm not one of these guys. I've been researching Bigfoot the rest of my life. I've got theories about where they're at. They take the Hall River from the mountains down to the coast in North Carolina, just like they would any other migration route. You can pretty much stay on the Cape Fear River or the Northeast Cape Fear River all the way down to Wilmington, North Carolina, and you can stay hidden. There is plenty of forest and woods on either side of that river that goes from up in the mountains. The Hall River runs back into the Cape Fear and it runs on down. So there's plenty of woods. There's been footprint found on the Hall River. There's been Bigfoot sightings on the Hall River. There's been Bigfoot sightings on the Cape Fear River. I live in a county that there are no Bigfoot sightings in. However, my wife was a sheriff's deputy. She passed away in 2016. She had breast cancer. So I had lost her in 2016, but I had made a lot of friends on the sheriff's department. And one of the guys, we were sitting around one night, and one of my dear friends was telling me about a deputy that he knew. And it was a little road almost to Sharon Harris Nuclear Power Plant. It's right in the middle of the state. It's in Harnett County, which is the county I'm in. But if you look on the Bigfoot Field Research website, there's no sightings in Harnett County. However, I know of at least one, and that's just from a deputy. And he was going down a road. The road was called Golf Road, Goff, Golf Road. And it's a beautiful road. There's winding hills here. We're at the foothills of the mountains. So it's kind of, the terrain here is not flat like it is in Eastern North Carolina. It's kind of hilly. There's, little bluffs and stuff here and there, rock formations, starting to get into the Piedmont section of the state up into the mountains. So we're right in the middle. But he was coming down and he went over one of these little, hills in the road. And it was probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. He saw 2 guys fighting in the middle of the road. So, of course, he stopped. He turned on his bright lights. He flashed his blue lights on, and he got on the loudspeaker and said, "Hey, you guys need to cut it out. What's going on?" And they wouldn't stop. And as he got a little bit closer to him with his flashlight, he could tell that there were not humans. They were two Bigfoot fighting. He said one would pick one up and slam on the ground, and the other one would wrestle around the ground, get up and grab the other one and throw him on the ground. And they were fighting back and forth. And if anybody's been watching Expedition Bigfoot with Russell, he found where two of them were fighting in the woods. Well, these guys were doing the same thing. But he never told anybody until he met me. He finally figured out, okay, I didn't see something. I'm not crazy because, this guy Hans has seen one as well. I've never really posted my story until there was a similar sighting about 20 miles from where I had mine at. And it is on the Bigfoot research website. And it was a off-duty wildlife officer or a law enforcement officer was hunting about 20 miles from where I was at on the same creek that feeds out of the Goshen Swamp. And he saw a 6 or 7 foot humanoid figure bending over, drinking water from the stream. As soon as it saw him, it stood up. It didn't run. It just turned and walked away from him. So once I saw that story, I decided to tell somebody about my sighting. There's also one more sighting about a man down in Chickapin, North Carolina, which is not far from the Goshen Swamp. And there's a tributary that feeds into the Goshen from there as well. Contentment Creek is down that way, and Black Creek, and there's several other tributaries down there. But he had one that was eating his deer corn one day. He went out there and something was sitting down eating deer corn. He yelled at it. I think he said he had a 38, but it wouldn't do anything. And he yelled at the thing, and it stood up. When he stood up, he just like, oh my God, that's not a bear. And this thing just walked off as well. So there's been 3 sightings from where I saw mine and 2 others. But that is about the extent of my knowledge. I know my uncle was down in Santee Cooper's, where he lives around Goose Creek, South Carolina, and he was run out of woods or something. You got to understand my Uncle Richard, he likes big bore magnums. He's got a 50 caliber pistol. He's got 460 caliber pistols. He's got 44 mags. He just has a massive armament. When he goes out in the woods, he goes out very prepared. And they were on 4-wheelers. They were way out in the back of Santee Cooper, down in the swamp somewhere. They were hunting hogs at the time. And he said something run him out of the woods. He said when it yelled, it pure shook him to the core. And my uncle's not one that fears easy, and he's got way too much armament for have anybody to run him out of anywhere. But he said he was in fear for his life, and he got on that 4-wheeler and he left. And I don't think he ever went back with these guys hunting in that area. So there's several of my family members that have had some kind of encounter or the other, but I think I'm the only one who's actually truly seen one in person. But he walked right out of the legend book, right out of the movie screen, and right into my life. And ever since then, I've been watching Bigfoot films. I follow your podcast. I follow several other podcasts. I actually went to the Bigfoot Festival in Marion, North Carolina. I met the Squatch Watcher guys up there. They go out a lot of times here in North Carolina, and they run into a lot of unusual stuff. But I'm just a big enthusiast because I just want to know more about them. I want to learn as much as I can. I want to see some of the pictures I see on the internet are not what I saw. Some of the pictures on the internet are what I saw. So, I know that some people may be a little bit off. These creatures may have, I'm sure they have different forms just like everybody else. You're either a linebacker or, you work at in IT or whatever. Just your physique is going to depend on where you work and whether you have to do physical labor, manual labor. You're going to sit at a computer screen, male, female, juvenile. So there's a whole list of things that these things could possibly look like: big, small. This one was massive. This one was a male. It had to be an alpha male. It was huge, but he never showed any signs of aggression. I never felt threatened except by the size, because once you look at something that big and it's alive and it's breathing and you can see the breath coming out of his nostrils. Because it was cold. I could see him breathing. But the breaths were like huge, massive intakes of air. I could hear him breathing. And his chest would rise and fall just like, a normal person would. But It was massive. It was massive chest. I mean, it was 4 foot across. He was probably 3 or 4 thick wide. From looking from the left side of him, he was really wide. I mean, he was huge. He was as wide as I am, and two of me. He's huge, and I'm 240 pounds. So he was massive. But that was my story. My uncle believes me to this day. Both of my uncles, they have had experiences that they can't explain, and my uncle actually believed me, and we skedaddled out of there and got out of there as fast as we could. Um, it scared me, and it might have scared him. I don't know. He was a little bit more calm than I was, but he acted like he wanted to go ahead and get out of there as well. So, but that's the story, and that's if you got any question or anything, I'll be more than happy to try to answer if I can. And
All right, Hans. Thank you very much for sharing your Bigfoot encounter with me. And that gave me chills just hearing about that. I can't imagine what you felt like being out there alone, deer hunting, and running into this creature. About how far away was this creature from you?
20, 30 feet. He
Oh, wow.
was not at the end of the path. He was about in the middle of it. Like I said, the path was about 40 foot long, and I was at one end of it, and he was like in the middle. So about 25, 30 feet from me. That's how I could see all the detail. I mean, his hair was matted. He had twigs in his hair. Um, he had particles of leaves and stuff stuck in his fur. It was pretty long. I mean, the fur was probably 6, 7 inches long in his arms. It was hanging, of course, his arms were hanging to his side, and the hair was hanging off the back of his arms like you'd see a chimpanzee or gorilla or orangutan, anything like that. But it was matted and nasty. And I reckon he had walked through the water to probably get, at least a little bit clean. I don't know if they take baths or not, but I mean, if you're walking through water like that, I mean, it's not clean water, but it's a lot better than not having any kind of water on your body at all, I would assume. But no smell other than just that water, that old musty, damp, swampy, watery mud smell is all I could smell. But he was massive for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you believe this creature is living in the swamps and in the marshes?
Yep. There's been 6 or 8 sightings in Onslow County, and if anybody's not familiar with Onslow County, it's down near the beach. I mean, Topsail Beach is down there. All the beaches are down around that way, but there's a huge, massive area down there that the U.S. military has. It's Camp Geiger airfield where the Ospreys are stored. You've got the F-35s up at Camp Lejeune and Cherry Point Marine Station. So they've got thousands and thousands of acres of woods back there that nobody can go on because they do maneuvers on. It's posted. There's no hunting. It's basically a federal, base is what it is. And I live probably 25 miles from Fort Bragg, and I have read stories about Fort Bragg about the soldiers. A guy had a thermal camera, and he's like, "Hey, you got one guy out of place." He's like, "No, all my guys are in place." He said, "No, I'm watching a guy flanking you to the left, and he's huge." He's like, "No, all my people are in formation." He said, and so I heard, that these guys dug in, they got in foxholes and stuff, and this creature would walk past them in the foxholes. And they were told not to engage in them, not to bother them, just let them go. So, there's been a couple of reported sightings around Fort Bragg as well, which is in the Fayetteville area. So they're all over eastern North Carolina and western North Carolina. But I thought it kind of surprising that Onslow County would have more sightings than just about the mountains would. I think they got 6 or 8 sightings. You can look on the Bigfoot website. It's ONLOW, Onslow County. And it's got like 6 or 7 reported sightings there. So um, they're all over North Carolina for sure.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I'm sure there's a ton of people who have seen these things and never said a word about it. It sounds like this thing was deer hunting as well. You mentioned seeing the deer coming out of the corner of the field, and you moved
Yep.
to get closer, and that's where this thing came out of as well.
That is exactly what I figured. And my uncle was hunting as well. So he knew where my uncle was. So maybe walking around my uncle's stand kind of fended the deer off from him and started him in my direction. And then he got in the water to be stealthy, and because he could have walked around on land, but I think he got in the water to be stealthy, because if he does smell bad, deer can smell him, and maybe the water masked his smell, and he just stealthily was going to come up on these deer and grab one as they were coming back into the field. So I don't know, but that's a very good possibility.
Yeah, I've taken reports where people say the Sasquatch came out of the water, and it seems like these things can swim like gators. Do you think that's a possibility?
Absolutely, there's no doubt in my mind. There's only a couple of things in the world that cannot swim at birth, and that is baby monkeys and humans. Almost anything else at birth can swim. Dogs, cats, rats, rodents, whatever. Um, so for them to be able to swim, absolutely. And being 8 foot tall, even if you're in some deep water, they can wade as well. But yeah, there's no doubt in my mind they can go in the water, they can swim, they can probably do what humans can do. Probably not far off from us to begin with. I'm more of a relative hominoid type avenue. I can believe some of the extraterrestrial stuff. I've never really had a whole lot happen to me around Bigfoot sightings, but I can tell you for sure that that's a flesh and blood creature. He is here. He's in the swamps. He is in the woods. He's everywhere. He's at the beach. He's in the mountains. And just you tread lightly. I mean, I'm not saying anybody to go in the woods. I mean, I encourage people to get out and enjoy, the wonders of nature and God's creations and all of his creations. And if something like that's going to, scare you from going out, then you really shouldn't be scared of them. I don't think. I think, maybe a case of one or two rogue ones. Yes, I can understand that for sure. I mean, that happens with humans. But most of them, I believe, are family units. They're just going about their day. They're in places that humans are not. Swamps and mountains and places humans can't get to or very rarely able to get to are the places these things are going to be. You just have to be in the right place at the right time. I don't really think you can go look at them. You might can provoke one to do a tree knock or yell at you or growl back or something. But as far as physically chasing one down, the only ones I've ever seen to come anywhere close to that is Expedition Bigfoot. And I've got all 6 seasons. I bought all 6 seasons of it and I watch it, and I learn something new each time I watch one of these series. But they're the closest that they've ever come, and I give it a couple of 2 or 3 more years, and they're gonna find this thing. They have so many elaborate tools and technologies and stuff out that it's going to be impossible for it to hide for long. Um, Especially with the sightings going up to almost 10,000 now. So I remember when it was at 2,000, and now it's at 10,000. So people have cameras, people are in the woods, they're doing more. The millennials are getting out. They're going camping. They're going fishing. They're going hiking. The Appalachian Trail is one of the most popular trails that there is. It comes right through North Carolina, and these guys are always finding things on these paths. People are getting missing. There was one story about believe it or not, a special forces team to go up there, and they killed like 3 or 4 of these rogue Sasquatches that were terrorizing the town in North Carolina. Of course, that's on the internet and everything. I don't know if it's on the BFRO or whatever, but I've watched, like I said, I've watched thousands and thousands of Bigfoot reels and stuff on YouTube, and I'm just fascinated with it. But yeah, they're like humans. There's good ones, there's bad ones. There's ones that want to be left alone, and there may be some that want to cause havoc. I don't know, but for the most part, I think they stay by themselves, and they're like anything else. They just want to be left alone and want to go about their lives, and they don't want to have a bunch of people running around trying to find them with cameras. So I can understand them getting upset or yelling or trying to elude the cameras, because once you have an interaction with a human being, you're going to never be the same at all. So
Yeah, absolutely. They try to stay away from people, but every now and then some of them engage with human beings, and it makes me wonder why. You said you could hear something coming through the water right at dark, and you thought it was a deer. What did it sound like? Just like a swooshing sound?
just swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. It didn't sound like a little patter of deer feet in shallow water. It sounded like something wading through the water, sloshing, slosh, slosh. And you could, I mean, it wasn't loud, but I could hear it. And I was like, well, I mean, that's the only thing I think of was a deer. I wasn't expecting a Bigfoot to walk. I was like, expecting a deer to walk out. I had no clue the water was 6.5 foot deep. So I didn't know what, you can't tell with that water because you can't see the bottom because it's just so stained. It's black water. But I could hear it swashing. And when it come up, I could hear the water dripping onto the dry leaves. And there was no really footprints. There was there was one indention where he was standing that was wet around like a 5-foot area that was wet. He could tell something was standing there. He said, "Is this where he was standing?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "See, it's wet all the way around here." He said, "Holy crap." He said, "That's 4 or 5 foot around." I said, "Yes, sir. That's how big his ass was." And he said, "He was standing right here." I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "You see that indention right there?" Of course, there's a bunch of ground clutter, bunch of leaves. You couldn't really tell a footprint, and he never touched the dirt, but you could tell where the leaves were squished out. He said, "My God," he said, "that's what he told me. Go to the truck, run, don't look back." That's when I took off. When we realized how he realized how big it was, and I won't telling no story that if a man would have walked up there with waders, there wouldn't have been a 5-foot circle of water or 5-foot circle of dampened soil where this thing was dripping. Because I could see it dripping off his fur. I mean, the water was it was glistening. It wasn't like it was waterproof or anything, but it was like it was beating off of him. It must have been really oily. It was almost like pouring oil on something that or pulling oil on hair and just getting it really oily and just putting water on it and just having the water just kind of bead off of it. It's kind of what it looked like. Um, but he was definitely drenched and just dripping right on that path. So
Yeah. Typically, he went back into the swamp and probably came
yeah,
out from another end and kind of followed you guys out of there. I don't believe that they'll just take off and leave. Like, I think
no,
they try to get another angle on you and watch you the whole time. So maybe it did leave, but I believe it was keeping an eye on you guys. You said you were wearing camouflage. Did you just have a hat on, or did you have
I
like a
had a
face?
hat. I had a hat. I had a face shield on. I had my shoes were my boots were camouflage. My pants were camouflage. Shirt was camouflage. Camouflage jacket on. Camouflage hat on. And I had a veil, a camouflage veil on, and I wasn't moving at all. I was froze. I couldn't move.
Yeah.
But for some reason, and he could not smell me because I had the wind to my back. I mean, any hunter knows put your wind to your back, your game is not going to be able to smell you as they're coming towards you. And that's exactly what I was doing. But when he turned around, it wasn't like he was trying to pan to look for something. He looked like he was looking directly in my eyes. He knew I was there. Don't know how, but he knew there's something there and it shouldn't be there. Now, he may have been up on there before because this is a sweet potato field. North Carolina, when you harvest the sweet potatoes, there's a lot of them that are left in the field. So a lot of the migrants that go out there to work in the fields will go out there and the farmer will say, just get whatever's left if you want to. So you can have, sweet potatoes out there that are cutting half by the disc or whatever, or down in the ground a little bit deeper than what, they were digging. So there's an abundance of sweet potatoes and deer in the same field. So he may have been going in that field a lot, then all of a sudden seeing a big old lump sitting there on the side, thinking, that shouldn't be there. But he looked directly at me like he was looking through me. And that's when I felt this white hot heat just go all the way down my body. It was almost like it was just sapping my strength where I couldn't move, couldn't yell, couldn't scream, couldn't blink. Just standing there looking at him in awe. And it was almost like I was paralyzed. I mean, I don't know if it was infrasound. I don't know if it was just me being scared to death because I've never been that scared in my life. My legs wouldn't work. I wanted to get up and run, couldn't. It was going through my head. Hell, he might have been sensing what I was trying to do, and maybe he just wanted me to stay where I was at. I mean, he may have been controlling me. I don't know. But I know I couldn't get up. I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. And when he turned, I almost felt like in a little elation there that, hey, okay, he's not really interested in me. And then he stepped off. And once he stepped off, I could move my legs, I could move my hands again. Um, but I just couldn't remember my uncle coming up. I couldn't remember yelling or anything. Couldn't remember. But he said I yelled one time, and I don't remember it. But
Yeah,
so
that's
it was it
terrifying.
was it was it was. I still think about it to this day. I mean, have I been back to the site? I probably couldn't find the site if I wanted to. It's been so long ago, and so many things have changed in this area, so I don't even know I could even find the place or not. But anytime I go down around Wilmington, any place like that, I'm always looking on the side of the Cape Fear River. Or I'm always looking around. We have a place called Raven Rock State Park right here in Harnett County, and heard of a couple of sightings at Raven Rock, but there's none on the Bigfoot website. But I have heard that there have been people that have seen them around Raven Rock State Park, which is a really big state park, and it's about a 5 or 6 mile hike to this rock, and this rock outcropping is overlooking the Cape Fear River. And right around Dunn and Irwin, where the Cape Fear comes through, is actually some Class 2 rapids, believe it or not, down there. Um, but on both sides of the river, you can walk from the mountains to the coast, and nobody will ever see you. So, and I think that's a traffic for them. I think they come from the mountains to the coast on certain occasions, and then they come back up through this area, through the Cape Fear River. We got another big river that's the Neuse River, and that's down in eastern North Carolina, and that comes out in New Bern, North Carolina, joins with the Albemarle Sound. But the Cape Fear River goes down and empties out into the ocean at Wilmington. They actually come back together. The Northeast Cape Fear and the regular Cape Fear come back together right there at Wilmington, and then they flow out into the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, that's incredible. It amazes me the Sasquatch was able to pinpoint exactly where you were, and you had the wind in your face and you're fully covered in camouflage. So that makes me believe that they're able to sense us without even hearing us or smelling us, and perhaps it was able to see your aura or your energy. Scientists talk about how animals are able to see auras, and I was reading this and the whatever it's called, the Wild Turkey Federation or whatever, they were talking about how turkeys can see auras, and that's kind of how the hens like seek out the right gobbler to breed with, and that's why
Yeah,
the gobblers are out there strutting. I guess there's like an aura that we can't see, and that's kind of how they breed. But maybe these things can
I'm
see
sure.
that.
I'm sure that with trail cams and stuff. I've always been the one to say, they can see the infrared on the trail cameras. That's why people are not. If you want to get rid of a Bigfoot, put a trail camera up, because they're not going to come back around because they can see it. I'm a firm believer in it. I mean, I've seen so many things where, where on Expedition Bigfoot, something actually turned Russ's camera, and you can see there's some hand or something who actually turns that camera. So if that's not enough proof for anybody, and I don't know what is, because I mean I don't think there's anybody out there running around in a suit turning trail cameras just to be funny. It's just not going to happen. There's too much evidence to the contrary, and I don't know why scientists. I know they're literal people, and they have to have a body. They have to have something they can touch, or they don't believe in it. But I'm here to tell them it don't matter. You go on out in the woods by yourself if you want to, but hopefully you'll run up on one and you'll understand, and you won't be a skeptic and a scientist anymore. You'll actually try to dip into it.
Mm.
I actually called Jeff Melbourne, and I actually talked to Dr. Meldrum about my experience, and he said, "Was there any footprints?" Of course, and I'm like, "No, there were no footprints." I said, "But I just wanted you to know my story here in North Carolina." So I actually I got the honor to talk to him, and he's kind of like a celebrity to me because I mean I've watched a lot of his podcasts and a lot of his specials on YouTube and stuff. So, but
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative to people like you who are going to bring us these stories like this without having to charge people, without having to, you know, have a subscription or a membership, because you're doing people a favor by informing them without um directly emptying their pockets at the same time. So I do appreciate The fact that your YouTube channel and everything actually does that. So
Yeah, it's no problem. And I feel like it's not right to charge people for the encounters that are submitted to me for free. People just call me and they're willing to share their experiences to try to seek validation or just to share the story with somebody else who has seen them. So I don't feel like it's right to take these reports and not tell people. I've heard of channels doing that where they'll take people's story and the people that submit their story never see it up on the channel. They're like, what the heck? So
yeah.
I don't want to do
Well,
that.
there's a guy. Yeah, there's a guy. It's a redheaded guy. He got a beard. He got a mustache and beard, and he's done a couple of these channels. And I was going to reach out to him to see if he would be interested. And so I called him, I emailed him, texted him, and he texted me back. He said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I charge $200 to come down to an interview." I'm like, "And where do you live at?" I can't remember where he said. I said, "Well, just stay right where you're at." I said, "I'm not paying you $200 to come down here and interview me."
Yeah, he should be paying you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was like, "You're really gonna? Do you really charge?" He's like, "Yeah, I charge $200. I'll come do an interview." And I was like, "No, no, no, I'm good." I mean, stay right where you're at. I said, "We'll find some other way." So,
Yeah. Well, that's
but
cool.
anyway,
You
that's
got this.
basically my story and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. You got to speak with Jeff Meldrum, and he's definitely the foot guy, the track guy to talk to. And I'm sure either way, he was still interested about your encounter. And
Oh,
yeah,
he was very interested because there's been some casts around the Hall River, which is up in the mountains of North Carolina, and I think he's actually looked at one or two of those tracks. So I'm not sure, but I would love to know if he's had any tracks from North Carolina around the Hall River or Cape Fear River where I'm at.
yeah, I almost
Really like to
guarantee
know
he
that for
has.
sure.
I was talking to a guy from North Carolina right before you called, and he was showing me a very interesting trail cam photo that he captured. And they've had some activity on the property. You can't fully see what the creature is, but he said the camera was like 5 or 6 feet off the ground, and you just see this big white figure. And I mean, it's really detailed, but it was really close to Medoc Mountain. And I've interviewed two different people from Medoc Mountain who have seen this whitish gray looking Sasquatch, and
Hmm.
that's what it looks like. So
Actually, matter of fact, that's the show I was watching when I contacted you. I was actually watching that because he's up around Rocky Mount, which is about 60 miles north of me. He's up towards the northern part of the state in the middle, and I'm more down in the middle part of the state. So he's only about 60 miles from me. But I was gonna, maybe if we ever get a chance, I'd love to get up with him and talk to him about his experience. And heck, we may get up, and I may go and see if we can go out and find something. I've always wanted to do that. I always loved to do that.
yeah.
Just really, haven't had the time until I've gotten a little bit older and I've got a little bit more established in my job. So
Mhm.
I can start taking some weekends to going out and just kind of hike a little bit. I'm not in great shape, but I do love the outdoors. I love to camp. So
Yeah. His
I
name's
may start doing a little
Johnny.
bit of that.
Yeah, his name's Johnny, and I believe he has a website called Medoc Mountain Bigfoot. I think that's what it's called, but I'm sure
Okay.
you can reach out to him from there, or I'll give him your
Yeah.
contact information. And yeah,
Okay.
you're not that far away. 60 miles sounds really far to us because we have to get on the highway or the interstate and drive, but they say a black bear can travel 40 miles in one day, and if a black bear can do that, I'm sure a Sasquatch can do like 120 in just one day. So that's actually
Oh
pretty
yeah,
close.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's also, this the one I saw was like a reddish brown, but it was wet, so I could not really tell exactly what color. But now the guy that saw it about 20 miles from my sighting said it was reddish brown. And mine was a little bit more of a dark brown, but now he was wet too. He was not dry. The one he saw was dry and drinking water. So, I'm sure they change a little bit of color when they get in the water or whatever. And I'm sure there's older Bigfoot walking around that are gray. I mean, that's just standard. People get gray. Your skin gets weather. It gets, your skin gets loose. You get wrinkles. The tautness of your skin is gone. And that's about what this was like. He didn't like he had very taut skin. It was very squished and wrinkles, but they were really deep furrowed ridges in his nose and his cheeks, and they were leather colored. They were like almost like just a piece of boot leather. It's
Mhm.
what they looked like. They were very, very worn.
Like an
And
old
it's
Native American.
Yes, absolutely. Like a old Native American Indian or whatever. You see a picture of they're just weathered and deep, deep creases in their face and their crow's, the crow's feet on the side of their eyes and stuff. Just really deep ridges. And his head was the same way. It was notched up, like almost like there was not a lot of hair on it, and I could see the furrows of his forehead underneath the fur. It was almost like a crew cut guy. His hair was short there, but you could see the furs of skin that went right up to the top of his that conical shaped head.
Did it taper back above the brow ridge?
And I could see ears.
Like a human?
They were huge. Yes. But I mean, they were covered with, you could see that like the bottom lobe, like you would see a bottom lobe. I could see the bottom lobe of his ear. So I was kind of looking around and I could see the bottom lobe of his left ear. And then when he turned, of course, I couldn't see it because of but when he turned back, I could still see that lobe. And it was, it's big as your thumb.
Yeah.
Yours is, you can kind of compare your lower lobe of your ear. And this was big. It was huge. It's the size of a quarter or 50-cent piece. It's about. It was huge. So I'm sure they've got good, outstanding hearing as well as vision.
Yeah. And above the brow ridge, how big was the conical shaped head? Was it elongated or did it just come to like a crest, like a point, kind of like a robin or kind of like a blue jay or a cardinal?
No, it didn't come to a point. It was more conical shape. When it went up, it was just like a cone. It went right up to the top and it was a smooth come over on the top and just kind of tapered down to the back. And like I said, he didn't have a lot of fur on his head or hair on his head. But once it got around his neck, it was really long and shaggy from his neck all the way down. And like I said, I couldn't see genitals because he had hair hanging between his legs almost to his knees.
Okay, so like a ghillie suit.
On.
Like a ghillie suit?
Like an apron, yep.
Yeah, and like around the neck, was it like a mane? Like, was it really long around the neck?
No. It just kind of tapered from his head short, and it started getting a little bit longer, and then, of course, on his arms, on the back side of his arms, it was probably 6 inches long, and maybe 4 or 5 inches, around his chest area. Both of his breasts were not, they didn't have any hair on them, because I could see the nipples, huge nipples on his breast, but he didn't have any hair on his breast, but now his stomach had hair on it. So it wasn't like, you see a costume where the whole chest is bare and the belly's bare. That's not what it was. But now his breasts were bare. But now the rest of his belly was covered in hair.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard that before. So this creature opened up its mouth and showed you his teeth.
Yeah, it wasn't like a snarl or anything. He just kind of, it wasn't like a smile or anything. It was more like almost like when your jaw drops when you're like curious about something. And he just kind of looked at me with that open mouth, and I could see his teeth, and they were not snarled or anything. I mean, they were flat. They would look like they were very worn, but they looked like they were huge. I mean, they looked like big kernels of corn, like hummus, like that. I don't know. They were huge. I mean, but they were flat, just like ours. They weren't yellow. They were like a whitish, opaque white. He didn't have, I didn't see no cavities or anything, but I mean, he had teeth like ours. I mean, there weren't no fangs, there weren't no canines. They were all just straight across.
So it was all block teeth. There weren't canines.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's terrifying. And it wasn't like he opened his mouth kind of like when a baboon yawns or like, I don't know. It wasn't like.
No, he just, his jaw dropped like he couldn't believe I was there. Of course, I couldn't believe he was there. So I don't know if my mouth was open and he had imitated me or what. I don't know. But yeah, he opened his mouth. I mean, I could see his mouth, his teeth. But it wasn't like a snarl or anything. I didn't feel threatened. I didn't hear he didn't make any noise other than I could hear his breathing. And it was just just a real heavy, deep, almost like a barrel type breath. That's what he was taking. I mean, it wasn't growling or anything. It was breathing, so I could hear him.
Yeah, he knew something was off. That's for sure. And you described it like a huge guy in a ghillie suit with water dripping off of him. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know many people that are 8 foot tall that have ghillie suits on, and he didn't move like a man in a ghillie suit because that's a cumbersome type thing to do. it was like he was gliding. It was not even hardly like taking a step. It was almost like he was on a conveyor belt. You know, one of those things that you get on the airport and you just stand on it and it goes. That's what it looked like when he would walk. So I mean, there's no way in heck a man could be that elegant in the woods. There's just no way. And you
So
could tell he had done that before. He had come through that. He had come through that swamp before. He knew exactly what he was doing.
was the movement like supernatural, or was it like
No,
Michael
it was
Jackson walking forward?
just like Michael Jackson. I mean, it was just a one smooth transition. I mean, it was just. I mean, he didn't bob up and down. He just really kind of just glid. I mean, the step was huge. When he stepped up, I could tell that he bent. He bent at the knee, but it was like where his knee was, his leg went straight back to his foot. And I tried to walk like that, and I've seen other people try to walk like that. And I've had, I've seen people try to imitate the paddy footage, and basically they said it was impossible for a human to walk like that with that kind of suit on. So I know it wasn't no human. It was a Bigfoot, and he looked at me, I looked at him, and he walked off. And I've been, just researching it ever since. I mean, I'm just intrigued with it. I mean, it's one of the only things I have that I study on a daily basis. I mean, I watch YouTube videos almost every day. I read and research and try to hook up with people in my area that have, spotted them. I don't do a whole lot of research per se, but I enjoy the entertainment of it. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it's pretty common for people to encounter a Sasquatch and say they never really smelled anything. A lot of times people go out in the woods and say, I smelled something really bad. It must have been a Bigfoot. But most eyesight encounters, I don't hear people mention this bad odor. And with my Bigfoot encounters, I never smelled anything off. Now, later on after the encounters, I would get this unusual smell. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like rotten mushrooms out in the woods, or maybe a dead
mhm.
animal, but I'm not sure. I believe maybe they can release like some type of stink pheromone whenever they get nervous, possibly. But yeah, typically
I was
I
thinking the
don't hear
same
that.
thing. I'm thinking almost like a skunk.
Mm-hmm.
They get nervous or they want to ward something off or want to make their presence known. They may be able to put off like a deer with a gland on his leg. He puts off that nasty musk, but to a doe it smells wonderful. And he may do the same thing. He may say, "No, I need to make sure that these humans understand that I'm here," and put off that stink. And sometimes it may deter people, or they may walk off or try to get out of the stench, or sometimes they may try to follow it. But I think that's a defense mechanism as well.
Yeah,
That and being ungroomed and uncouth in the woods. So
absolutely. A defense mechanism, or maybe Bigfoot in rut. Who knows?
yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So
so you mentioned you froze and you couldn't move. Your blood went cold and you felt dizzy. Do you think this creature like hit you with infrasound, or you think that was due to fear?
no, he may very well have. I never heard anything physically, but when I felt that, it was like a warm sensation. Like, I don't know. I've passed out before, and I've gotten really flushed and really hot, and then I passed out. And it was kind of like I was going to pass out, but I didn't. But at the same time, I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I mean, I would love to say, hey, or hey, I don't mean you to harm anything. I couldn't even do that. I was just, I mean, I was froze. And like I said, now I don't remember yelling, but my uncle come over to me and said I had yelled, but I don't remember yelling. So I don't know what he did to me. I don't know if I yelled while I was still, you know, in incoherent of things, or I don't know, but I don't remember yelling. But he came, so
Yeah, that is strange that your uncle heard you yell and you don't remember doing that. You said the encounter lasted about 30 seconds or so. Maybe it was longer. It's hard to say if you don't remember
oh
yelling. That's kind of
yeah,
scary.
I mean, well, it took him a while to get to his from his deer stand to me because he was almost a half a mile away from me. So between that time I saw him and when my uncle came, I don't know what kind of time span it was. I have no clue. I know the sun had already basically gone down, and it was on top of the trees when I saw him. So from the time, of course, the sun goes down pretty quick, but the sun was fairly high up on top of the trees, and by the time my uncle got to me and I had snapped out of it, it was getting dark, and that's why we went ahead and hauled it to the truck because we figured if that thing was out there and it got dark and we were in that field, he could do whatever he wanted to. So we went ahead and vacated.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that it was circling your uncle doing these deep guttural grunts, it makes me believe that it was a different clan member. If there's one, there's typically more, but it could have been the same creature. It's hard to say.
Yeah, well, it possibly could have been two. One could have been checking him out, and one could have been, he said, I'll walk around this guy and make sure that you go up there and you can get a deer in that field or grab us some sweet potatoes, and I'll make sure this guy don't get down until you get clear. So, I mean, that might have been the case too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of them might have been baiting my uncle to stay in the deer stand while the other could go and, get the sweet potatoes out of the field, or because there's still sweet potatoes laying in the field. I mean, they were all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the scary thing is we go out there to hunt. We think we're the apex predator, but in Bigfoot's eyes, it's open human season. So, I mean,
that's right. And
that's scary to think about.
But I'd hate to say, but humans are the most deadliest things in the world. I don't care how big a Bigfoot is, a human will find a way to kill one. So that's just in human nature, just a self-destruction, I reckon, is our thing. But I just hope they stay hidden and they stay safe. And if I get a chance to see another one, that'll be great. And if I don't, then once in a lifetime is more than some people get.
Absolutely, humans will find a way to kill them, and I think these creatures know that, and that's why they hide so well. They say with the giants in the past, if they really did exist, that they were eating humans, that they were cannibals, and then the humans started retaliating and fighting back, and they were killing off the giants.
Yeah. And that's just the destructive capabilities of man.
Mm-hmm. You said this creature...
But I think they're smart. They're smart. They're smart as we are.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it twisted at the waist, like it didn't turn its head. Is that correct?
No, it couldn't. You couldn't have a neck. You can't turn something you ain't got. It turned his whole entire body up from the waist. It just turned his shoulders. So in other words, I was looking at the left side. When he turned, he was almost facing me straight on with his legs still in a forward position.
Wow. Yeah, that's terrifying.
He was on. Yeah. I mean, and it was unnatural the way he moved. That's why I was like, oh, no, that's not a human. Because a human would have looked over here at me. He wouldn't have turned at the waist. And like I said, his neck was sitting, his head was sitting right on his shoulders. I could not tell any kind of throat or anything. It was just like a block sitting on a block. I mean, a round block sitting on a square block. That's what it looked like. And it was just one component. There was no neck. So yeah, he had to turn from the waist to actually see me. Yeah. But he looked right at me and he squared right at me.
You said the eyes look like
my eyes.
Yeah,
big black eyes.
And you said that they looked like they were sunken in the back of his head. Did it seem like it had Down syndrome or anything like that?
Oh no. Just the forehead protruded so much that the eyes were recessed so far back. But I didn't see any kind of white sclera in the eyes, which is the white part of the eyes. I never saw the white sclera or anything. It was just a solid black deer. Just a solid black eye, not like a dog with the white sclera around it, and then you got the dark in the middle. This was completely and totally pitch black.
Okay, so like demon eyes, pretty much. That's what I encountered here in the forest. They were jet black.
Onyx.
Yeah.
Yep, like a black onyx ring.
Yeah, exactly.
They were massive. It was the size of a big marble or like a 50-cent piece or a quarter. They were huge eyes.
Ink black eyes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And from what I could think of now, with the pupil size, I didn't see any pupils or anything, so I'm assuming that they're more of a nighttime creature because these eyes are wide open and they probably bring in light, ambient light that they can see in the dark. And I'm sure it was a nocturnal thing because it was getting the edge of dark, and that's where the deer were stirring, and that's where he was hunting. And when he came up and saw me, it was kind of like me being mad at another hunter. He might have been mad at me for screwing up his hunting. So I don't know. But he didn't bother me. He just walked off. And I'm sure he flanked around behind us and followed us to the truck. But
yeah, that shows intelligence there. And whenever the creature heard the gun click off of safety, he recognized that, and he kind of thought about it.
Yeah, he didn't really cock his head, but he kind of dropped his head just a little bit, like, what is that? And should I be worried about that noise? And that's when I started feeling that really, when I clicked that gun and he knew it, that's when I started feeling that cold rush and I couldn't move. So he may have said, you know what, he might be getting ready to shoot me. I'm going to throw some infrasound at him and just keep him right there for right now. And he might have done that to me because when that gun clicked off, that's when I couldn't move. Because that's the only move I made was clicking that gun off safety. I remember clicking off safety. I remember him looking at me and kind of looking like, what was that? But then after that, I couldn't move, couldn't yell, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything. All I could do was sit there and watch him. And when he walked off, I watched him until I couldn't watch him no more. And that's when my uncle was there. So I don't know where he went. I'm sure, like I said, he probably walked down a little bit further and got out and looped around behind us on the truck, but by the truck. But yeah, we took off out of there. So I've never been back.
Yeah, your uncle was very intelligent to say run to the truck, and most people would have been like, "Oh, that was a hog," or "You saw a guy walking out in the woods." Like, he took you seriously, which is good, and he said, "We need to get out of here now."
Yeah, well, he's retired Air Force major. He was a navigator on the C-135, so he knows direction. He knows a bunch of stuff. He's very, very knowledgeable. Went to college and everything, and like I said, he retired as a major, so he was a navigator. So he knew that I won't playing around, and that's why he did the little measurements and stuff he did. He's like, yeah, let's leave. So.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I'm sure when you guys were running back to the truck, all kinds of thoughts were flooding through your mind.
I didn't look back because I didn't want to see it coming behind me. If it was going to get me, it was going to have to get me from behind with me not looking because I didn't want it to get me. I headed to the truck. And the thing about it was we were armed, but it just seemed like it didn't matter, at the time.
Yeah.
We had no idea if we were dealing with 1 or 10.
Instinctually, it's like that the firearm you're holding won't do anything to this creature.
Other than make them mad or draw other ones in. And that's why I would never want to kill one, because if you do kill one and you make it out of the woods, you're going to be a millionaire the rest of your life maybe, but you're never going to be able to go anywhere near woods because you're going to be on a hit list. And, if you make it out of the woods, if you kill one, I'd like to see somebody kill one and didn't make it out of the woods. That's what I'd like to see, because I have a feeling if you killed one, it would be just like those miners down in Ape Canyon. They shot one of them and they retaliated with everything they had. So good luck if you want to shoot one to be famous. If you get out of the woods alive, then, more power to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not a good idea. And you talked to a deputy who said he saw 2 of these things fighting in the road.
Yeah.
That's
They weren't
incredible.
as big as the one. Yeah, they weren't as big as the ones of mine. These were only like 6.5 foot tall. So there might have been 2 juveniles. I don't know, but he could tell they were just picking each other up and slamming each other on the ground and throwing each other around. I said, "Well, what did you do, dude?" He said, "What could I do?" He said, "I had a pistol. I had a shotgun." I said, "I can't shoot them. They're not doing anything but fighting. They're too big for me to break up." He said, I got my car, turned around. He said, I went back. How I left. I just let them be. I said, well, that's probably the most wisest thing you could have done, because if they would have got mad at you, they could have, stuffed you in your tailpipe.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a deputy, and he was on duty, and he never told anybody. He didn't want to tell the sheriff. He didn't want to tell anybody. But he got to talking one night over a couple of beers, and of course, Truth Serum comes out, and he was telling me about his, and I started telling him about mine, and he's like, "Well, let me tell you what happened to me on Golf Road," and that's when he told me, and I'm like, "Well, I'll be damned."
Yeah, that's incredible. Is he still around today?
I'm sure he's still around. I haven't seen him in a long time. Mostly after my wife passed away in 2016, the guys in the sheriff's department kind of got, few and far between distance from me. I mean, I haven't talked to a whole lot. I still keep in contact with some of them, him and a couple of other ones that are, real good friends of mine I keep up with. But I'm sure he's still around in the area somewhere. I'd love for him to get on somewhere and tell his story, because I got it, secondhand from, I got it from, he told a friend of mine, and he introduced me finally to him, and I got it from him. But I mean, I had it secondhand first, but when he told me about it, it was the same. I mean, it was the same story that my friend had told me. So,
yeah.
But they were just fighting in the middle of the road, and there's nothing around this road. It's all woods on both sides. I mean, I've been down the road in the middle of the day and seen 10 or 12 deer just standing out there eating in the woods because it's just a road that not many people go down. So,
Well, if
and
you
it's
ever
right
run
by
into
Sharon
him,
Harris.
yeah,
Yep,
if you ever run into him, tell him I'd like to talk to him.
absolutely. I certainly will. Absolutely, I will.
Yeah, and
But I
this,
do appreciate your time and you taking my story. It means a lot to me to get this out. And I mean, I've told people at work and stuff. I think some of them halfway believe me. They know I don't lie. They don't know I don't have any reason to. So, my uncle definitely believes me. Both my uncles believe me. My brothers think I'm crazy, of course, but I saw what I saw, and you can't really take it back. So, just kind of have to deal with it and kind of work through your issues. And I'm trying to find out as much as I can out about them.
yeah, absolutely. And did you ever have any more experiences in the forest after this encounter?
Not really. I was in the woods and I thought something may have been following me, but I mean, I didn't pay much attention. It wasn't a huge deal. And and from then on, I hadn't really done a whole lot of hunting. I've mostly worked. I don't do a whole lot at all. I don't have a whole lot of a social life. I don't have people come over to my house all the time. It's basically me and my daughter, and that's it. I don't do a whole lot at all. That's why I watch a lot of YouTube, do a lot of research on Bigfoot, stuff like that. It's just a hobby of mine that I can do by myself. I don't have to worry about anybody being with me to do it or paying any money to do it other than, subscriptions to YouTube. So, but I
Yeah.
do appreciate your time today, Miguel. It was great talking to you, and I'm glad I got this story out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you contacted me, and this was one of the best encounters I've ever taken. And yeah, I'm sorry to hear about your wife and your father passing away. And if you ever need to talk to me about anything, or if you have any more experiences, you can definitely reach out anytime you'd like.
I definitely will. I just will, and I do appreciate. Like I said, I appreciate your channel and your podcast, and I hope more people subscribe, and I hope I can help you out with that because you're a true individual searching knowledge and not financial gain. So, and I appreciate that about you.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you as well. Yeah, I believe that answers all my questions, and you did a great job at describing this encounter, and you didn't rush through it. You explained everything with great detail, and I felt like I was right there with you in the hunting stand, and yeah, that's just terrifying to think about.
Yeah, it was for sure.
Okay,
But
well,
so will you notify me when you put this on your channel?
yes, absolutely. And if I forget to, you can message me anytime, and I'll keep you up to date when it'll drop on the channel. Okay.
Okay, well I'll have you in my phone, and if you get a chance, I'll kind of keep you informed. If you get a chance to come down to Marion, North Carolina, during the Bigfoot Festival, then you can do that. You let me know. I got the first beer. How about that?
That sounds good to me. And yeah, I appreciate you very much. And yeah, hopefully we get to meet up in the future. Okay.
All right, Miguel. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, my friend.
All right. I appreciate you too. And you have an excellent day. Okay. All
Thank you as well. Bye,
right.
brother.
Bye. All right, Hans, thank you very much for sharing this terrifying Bigfoot encounter from the swamps of North Carolina. I can't imagine what you felt like when you laid eyes on this creature and when the creature looked up at you after you clicked the safety off the gun. Man, I can't imagine what you went through and what you were feeling in those moments. I personally do not know if I would ever be able to go back to this area and deer hunt again. The swamps are a spooky place as it is, but to know that there are Sasquatch creatures in the area just make it a whole lot more creepy. It sounds like the Sasquatch creatures are living in the swamps of North Carolina and they're able to move freely through the swamp seeking their next food source. There is a lot of aquatic life in there, and I am sure the deer, turkey, squirrels, and other critters love it as well. The story that the deputy sheriff shared with Hans of the two Sasquatch creatures fighting in the middle of the road is definitely creepy to think about, and it sounds like it was possibly mating season and they were fighting over a female. What do you guys think about this encounter? And let me know down in the comments below. I wanted to update everyone on a new piece of equipment that I'm getting here in the near future, and I am thinking about purchasing a new thermal drone to look for Sasquatch. So if you guys can make a donation to the PayPal, you can leave a thanks donation through YouTube, or if you can, purchase some merchandise, but the best way is to make a donation through PayPal, and I really appreciate everyone for the support, and it really helps me to get out there to look for evidence. And I think a thermal drone will definitely be a handy piece of equipment whenever I'm out in the woods. So thank you, everyone, and you don't have to do this. If you don't want to donate, then don't donate, okay? A lot of people complain and say that this is about money. That's not what it's about, but we are out there looking for these creatures, and a lot of people complain that there's no evidence and that no one is looking for these things. So you can't have one without the other, and I do appreciate the people that are supporting the channel. So if you didn't donate, then you can't complain, okay? Thank you, everyone, for helping me out, and we will see what we can get here in the near future. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and if you have a Bigfoot encounter you would like to share with me, please contact me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. Thank you, everyone, and be safe out in the forest.